Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most fetching work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are coming to you live in the Discord. Hi everyone in the Discord. Welcome to the show. If you want to come join our live recording next week, which you should because it's our 100th episode, then you can go to duffmedia.com/discord and join there.
We'll be doing hopefully a few special things for that 100th episode recording, so it's definitely the one to try and make live if you can.
Yeah, but let's get into the chapters, shall we? Starting with playing a part 15.3, Lucy is very excitedly waiting for Wallace before he has to go for his surgery.
It's adorable. She's so excited to see him.
Yeah, it's very sweet, isn't it? It's nice that we get to see moments of Lucy having nice human moments, right? Because the whole point of what Verona is doing at the moment in the story is to allow Lucy to have this. And so yeah, it's just kind of nice that we get to see some nice Lucy moments. Because again, this is not something that she really had earlier in the story. She was very much always switched on to practice stuff, and I don't know. Yeah, it's just nice.
Yeah, well, a sort of defining trait of Verona and Lucy at the start of the story was that they'd really only ever had each other. And a big part of that for Lucy was kind of like a lot of the shit that had gone down with Paul and how that had just made her kind of an angry person. So yeah, it is just really nice, sort of as her friendship circle is sort of growing, while Verona's dipping away from the school, like to at least see Lucy thriving, in that environment.
Yeah, definitely. It's just very nice.
And like Wallace is just so great too. I love this moment where he basically is sort of explaining his mum, who's kind of helicoptering him a lot at the moment, and he's a bit like, oh, she's been extra anxious about everything, and I kind of lost my lid at her, and I was a total jerk, and so now she's trying to make it up to me, and so we went and got like gluten-free donuts, and I just love how Wallace just immediately paints a picture that his home life is the exact opposite of Verona's, in that he kind of lost it a bit, and now he's like, oh, I was the jerk, but also you can tell his mum is clearly apologetic because she's now also trying to make it up to him as well.
Yeah, it seems like they've got a fun dynamic, I suppose. I don't anticipate we'll get to explore it that much, but it sounds fun.
No, it sounds like she's worrying a lot, but kind of like just in that healthy zone of helicopter parenting where it's like it's a lot, but it's not like too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
But like, I guess the reason the Wallace versus like Verona's family thing kind of jumped out to me is because, we've had those moments where like Lucy and Jeremy have kind of connected as the two sort of important human friends that Verona has, and Avery too, I guess. Um, but like we haven't really ever seen, Verona have that sort of moment with Wallace, and I guess that makes sense because Verona's busy not being in this reality. But it's just interesting, I guess, to sort of there were like a lot of similarities I could draw a bit between Jeremy and Lucy when they were together, and it's just jumping out to me that we're not quite getting that with Wallace and Verona yet.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's different, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I just think that is a useful benchmark in some circumstances to sort of compare those two relationships, and it's maybe a little bit telling that Verona has sort of kept herself at an arm's distance from Wallace.
Well, yeah, interesting.
I mean, we know Verona doesn't hate Wallace, like the reason the reason he got Lucy's attention is because Verona had picked Wallace for class ranker and sort of made the case like that was something. So clearly, like there's some stuff to work with there, and it's just Verona is. I mean, we're going to talk next chapter about she can't even maintain her own friendships with Jeremy and stuff right now.
She doesn't have time for any relationships at all, let alone ones that are not directly her relationships.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So yeah, Lucy and Wallace are having this nice moment, but are interrupted by a good and an evil teacher.
Oh, it's hard to tell which is which.
No, Miss Hardy does well. Yeah. Oh, sorry, that was sarcasm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's really hard to tell. But Miss Hardy really is great. Saves the day here. It's good
Uh,
stuff.
yeah, thank God she was here as well, because like Mr. Sitton is just the fucking worst.
Yeah, you can see very clearly how it would have turned into just a huge ordeal that's so pointless. Like, what in what world is this something that needs to be actively punished or cared about? I don't know.
It's also like he even keeps going afterwards. Like after Jeremy starts to leave, he just is making comments at Lucy, and he's not letting like Lucy
Mm,
help him with his bag. And it's like thank
mm,
fuck Jeremy shows up and is able to sort of take over for her, because I think that's like the only reason Lucy is able to like keep her cool here.
mm. Yeah, it's very clearly shitty and like with no justification, right? Like I don't understand in Mr. Sitton's head what he thinks he is accomplishing here.
It's that mentality of just hating people who aren't following the rules. I reckon,
Right. I
like
guess.
the rule is they weren't meant to be in there. Like he doesn't like that, they're potentially kissing or whatever the fuck, and it's just like, yeah, he just wants to punish her for not having followed the rules,
Mm.
not being in line.
Yeah, I guess yeah, I don't know. Maybe I am it feels very American high school, like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to think of if I've had an experience that is this I
Oh,
guess just unreasonable.
yeah. I saw a lot of this at my school. And in fact, Teenage Elliot was probably closer to the Mister Sitton side of this, of just follow the rules and everything's easier. Which is why
Mm,
I feel like I could kind of see where it's just like he just gets mad when people aren't in line, because that's how
mm,
I used to be.
mm. Yeah, I don't know. It's
And it
pretty. Yeah,
it's
I mean, the,
pointless. It's
the fact that
stupid.
Wallace is going off to have surgery is like, I think enough extenuating, all the extenuating circumstances you need. The fact that Sitton doesn't immediately backtrack what he was saying then. I mean, I know he's a piece of shit, but like,
Yeah.
just in the small ways, it really lands, doesn't it?
Well, and so I mean, this is the thing, right? Like Mister Sitton is like their homeroom teacher, isn't he?
Mm,
So I'm just like, between Wallace leaving and like Mister Sitton being the homeroom teacher, I wonder if we're going to start to see the school shift a bit for Lucy, because like
mm,
at least next to Verona, Lucy has sort of been defined by the fact that she's going to this school
mm.
in these last two arcs, and now I'm just like, fuck, is she going to have to start investing in fetch tech? Because like, I mean, I suppose she's still got Melissa, who seems to be stepping up now that Wallace is leaving, and
Yes.
there's Jeremy and Mia and all that, but like this will be a hit to Lucy's enjoyment of the school, I imagine.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, the stuff running through Lucy's head at the moment around like what's going to happen to Wallace is interesting to me because Lucy definitely sets up this like mutually exclusive vibe where either Wallace can come back but the surgery hasn't gone perfectly, or the surgery goes well and Wallace leaves Kennett. And I think it's interesting that Lucy sets that up in her head like bad things are happening enough to Lucy at the moment that she can't she feels like those two things can't have both be true.
Is that is that not normal to think that? Like, do you not do this?
I mean,
where you
you think
where you like
about
you think you're gonna jinx it if you wish for all the good things to happen, so you make like bargains with the
you make
universe
a
in your head.
bargain. I
Yeah.
have to say I don't do that. I'm sorry,
Oh.
Elliot. But hey, maybe I'm the weird one. If you and Lucy both do it, I'm willing to accept that. But I don't know. It did seem a little strange to me, right? Like,
Well, like what it really sets the tone for is this idea that like yeah, in her head it is really setting up this idea that she can't have everything go well, and she's normalizing the idea that she's going to have to like accept some sort of loss, and she's just kind of it's like an exercise in like defining her priorities, because she's like, oh well,
mm,
would I rather lose Wallace or have him like have this injury? And I think like the normal healthy thing to do would be to pick him being happy and not having him than the other way around. So it's like
yes,
good that that is the side she lands on.
yes, but I don't see. Yeah, I guess this is one of the times I'm excited to have a chat here because I'm interested to hear if this is something that other people do as well. But it's just like I don't know. If I was Lucy, I'd be gunning for a double thumbs up.
Yeah, but then the universe doesn't give it to you, because That's not how the bargains that are totally made up
Sure,
work.
and possibly in the other verse universe, I can accept that, but we don't live in a
Yeah,
universe
yeah,
that is, semi-sentient or karmic.
yeah.
So I feel like, you know,
But it's like it's a lens into Lucy's psychology of like how she thinks Kenneth and everything is going right now, that it just doesn't seem reasonable to her that both of those
mm,
nice things can happen.
yeah, I definitely get that. But yeah, as you said, it's good that she picks Wallace's happiness over her own, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a healthy relationship thing to do.
Hmm. Um, so yeah, Lucy goes to class and starts hanging out with the gang, including Verona, who is now a part of the gang.
Yep, who is very fetch.
Hmm. um, the fetch is very fun. The vibe of the fetch being so clearly terrible and almost everyone going along with it except for Melissa is very wonderful. And it really tickled me in this chapter.
I mean, it's very Verona to just be like intentionally dancing on the line of just like constantly like mentioning all the twigs and sticks and stuff. I mean, from a practical standpoint, this might actually make sense because we've heard so much, and I think last week in particular, we heard a lot about how like the truth needs an outlet
Mm,
through a lot of this glamour stuff. So Fetch Verona is probably doing herself a lot of favors by actually constantly telling the truth in that way, because it otherwise shit gets bottled up inside her.
yeah,
Um,
that's a good
but
point.
it's hard not to also just read it as like this Fetch is fucking relishing in the fact it's not human, which that's the most Verona thing it could do.
Yeah, it's very authentic, I suppose.
I mean, because like the way it speaks, it's just read as Verona to me. Like, you know, oh, it's all leaves and dust in this noggin. Just sounds like something Verona would say as like a joke.
Yeah, I guess it does. But a few times, it's pretty clear that a few times it steps a little bit too far, and Melissa gives it weird looks, and Lucy takes a mental note of, like, I gotta talk to Verona about this because it's too much. And I just think that's wonderful.
Oh yeah, it was fucking hilarious. Like watching it just toy with them all speaking the truth. I mean, that's the thing that Verona does best in this story, and I love seeing the fetch do it just to like Lucy's dismay. Um, it but like the idea, like the thing you mentioned just then, like Lucy wanting to talk to Verona about what quality she's imparting on it, actually brings up like this really interesting aspect of, like obviously we chose fetching as our word for this arc because you can't have an arc called playing a part with this fetch in it and it's not going to be a part of the arc.
Yeah.
And like the fetch is Verona basically defining what she thinks she's meant to be, or like what
Mm.
passes for her. Like it's such an interesting project in kind of self-reflection, not because it's not like true self-reflection, it's like this slightly different flavor of like, what does this thing need to be so that like it can pass for me and won't get in trouble.
Yeah, and can, like,
um
fit the role that I've kind of
yeah,
fit
yeah, like
in the school and etc.
who who do I feel pressured to try and be,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
um and yeah, like that's so interesting. I wonder if we're going to go further with that and sort of get more insight into how Verona is selecting that stuff and what it says about her.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how if we'll have a conversation between Lucy and Verona about tempering the fetch a bit more or choosing which parts the fetch takes a bit more. And I can definitely see that being like an inroad into this conversation they probably are building towards around Verona defining herself.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
because this is like the fetch is kind of symbolically the parts of herself she's trying to avoid right now.
yeah.
She obviously puts some of herself in there, like because it's fucking joking around and being an idiot, but um, to a large extent, it's kind of representative of the parts of herself that she doesn't want anything to do with right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
That's the thing about glamour, right? If you give glamour enough time and attention, it can start to become real. Like that would be a funny direction for this fetch to go in.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the direction. Just anytime there's a useful duplicate, the fear is always that duplicate's gonna gain sentience, right? So I'm definitely vibing towards that direction.
I'm very
Um,
glad Florin's all the way in Thunder Bay.
yeah, I wonder what. would the fetch, if it did gain sentience, would it want to be Verona's human self? Because that is maybe something that Verona wants anyway. So
It wouldn't be a very good Verona if it did want to go to school, though. So I don't know. Like that's
true.
there's a catch-22 there of like if it's a good Verona copy, it won't. Yeah, it'd have to be fundamentally different to Verona in some aspects to be to want to be that.
Yeah, yeah, an interesting thought. I guess we'll
Yeah,
have to see.
like Aziza did it in our chat. Just said, "Oh, the fetch makes a fetch. It's going to be fetches all the way down."
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
I mean, sorry. The last thing I wanted to say quickly about the fetch is when the fetch first arrives, it takes Lucy like a whole sort of second. She has to pause to figure out whether it's real Verona or the fetch, which you think statistically would have been a very easy thing to sort out. Um, but I guess what jumped out to me is like something we saw. I think it was in 14.1 where we or 14.2. Lucy sort of saw the fetch, but didn't even think of it as Verona,
yeah.
and we sort of heard that the fetches were hardest to trick people who you like were close to. So the fact that Lucy now has to take a second to figure out whether it's Verona or the fetch is probably, while it's also speaking to maybe Verona getting better at making the fetch, uh, it's probably also speaking a little bit to how Lucy and Verona are growing apart a little bit, maybe.
Is it, or is it? Because, like, to me, it just is. I mean, it could be. You're right. It could be. But the fetch, Lucy taking a second to recognize the fetch is an indicator that they're still close. Because if they were
Yeah,
further apart, it would be easy to.
yeah, but when she
Sorry.
saw it in 14.2, she didn't even think it was Verona.
Yeah, but she also was she aware that there was a fetch running around at that point? I can't remember.
I mean, no, but like that's the thing. When she saw it, she was like, "Oh, that's not Verona." Now she's looking at it and she's like, "Oh, is that Verona or the fetch?" Like,
Right.
if it, you know,
Yeah.
if it
Yeah.
was the
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
I see it. Interesting.
And I mean, yeah, like that could just be that Verona's getting better at making the fetch, but like this is the other verse. It's kind of both, right? Like the fact that
Mm,
Verona is
mm.
using the fetch more, getting better at it, is this part of the same reason why they're growing apart
Well,
a
it's
bit.
working better on Lucy.
Like it's both, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I like that as a marker. I do like it. Um, in addition to Verona coming into the class, there's another student, and he's not from around these parts.
Yeah, this is a fun little wrinkle, especially in Mr. Sitton's class. Like,
Perfect
what?
classroom to be in.
Yeah, well, just what's really funny is like if Bracken's going to continue to be in Mr. Sitton's class with them, like he's going to kind of have the power because Mr. Sitton seemed to think Bracken was hot shit, and we know he hates Lucy. So like,
Mm-hmm.
if those two are ever like having a fight in class, we know whose side Mr. Sitton's going to try to be on.
Yeah.
So it's going to create a really fun dynamic.
Yeah, fun is definitely the word for it. I like the idea that is raised by Wallace unintentionally that Bracken is an underside version of all the like Bradens and Bryans and etc. in the class.
Yeah.
I think that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence against that, I would say, is that I don't think the Undercity has been that awful to its people yet to give them
What,
like
to
all
give
the
them
same
all
name.
similar names?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a step too far.
yeah, the Undercity's not that horrifying.
Mm.
That's just regular reality that pulls that shit.
So yeah, Lucy and Verona have a brief catch up via a mirror before Melissa comes in and intrudes.
I mean, the mirror text messaging is very cool, uh,
Mm.
and I love how Melissa slots into this scene as just like that character who doesn't understand how awful this world is yet, so she just gets to kind of like nerdgasm like we did when we found out about the Undercity. We're like, oh,
Yeah,
this is horrifying, but it's so cool. Like that, she's like, oh, there's a nega cannet, and it's just like it's such an oh God, what's contagious sort of excitement.
yeah, it's it is exciting, right? Which, yeah, like I'm really loving Melissa's vibe. I guess I think Lucy here still pays a bit of lip service to the concept that Melissa shouldn't jump in with both feet, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm warning you, like, oh, don't, forget about all this stuff. But clearly, that ship has sailed, and Melissa's not going to do that. So let's go in all in. Awaken Melissa, have her join the team proper because she's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we have heard, like we saw with Bristow's place and stuff, like there are different levels of being aware. And there's also the whole thing, if she gets like properly aware, I think Lucy in particular would sort of take that karmic responsibility for her and all that
Yes.
nonsense. So there's like a reason to keep pushing her away. But I do like that Lucy isn't really thinking about that stuff. It's more just like she's almost checking that Melissa is like giving informed consent as much as you can when the consent is around being informed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's fair enough. Lucy is definitely being ensuring that Melissa is walking into this with both eyes wide open.
Yeah, which is like good because if Lucy and the Kenneteers as a whole or whatever are going to sort of take this responsibility for her when she crosses the threshold or whatever properly, um, then yeah, I like it's good to I guess have like really made sure that she walked down that path as knowing as she could. I don't know if
mm,
karma actually respects that, but it should. The idea that like they tried to dissuade her a bit and make sure
yeah.
she knew what she was doing.
Yeah, I do think Lucy is being very good about this. Like, she says the thing about if you are in the Undercity, you're going to find it cool at first, but 5 or 10 minutes in, you're going to wish you called us 5 or 10 minutes ago. And I just think, like, that's such perfect advice for Lucy to give Melissa, and it really lands very successfully.
Yeah. It seems to sort of be the one thing that finally gets Melissa talked out of actually really wanting to go there. She's still curious
Yeah.
about it, and like, I think she frames it as a safer kind of curiousness later, as much as there can be in this. But
Mm.
yeah, it's yeah, it's all right.
I also think Lucy is probably the perfect. You talked about the idea that Lucy will probably shoulder some comic burden for Melissa. I think Lucy's the perfect like partner for Melissa, right? Because Lucy is so clearly kind, but not to the point of letting herself be walked over or letting Melissa accepting any of Melissa's shit, right? Like I'm imagining if it was Verona or Avery taking more responsibility for Melissa, Verona would just kind of deflect or ignore the more problematic things, and Avery would possibly just be too nice. Whereas Lucy will just hold Melissa to a higher standard, not an unfair standard, but a standard that is high enough that she will have to kind of adhere to it, and she will want to because she wants to participate in the magic stuff, right? So it's just kind of
Yeah.
a very natural pairing.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because there's a lot to there's a lot of comparisons to be made between Verona and Melissa, particularly in these chapters, but also just kind of
Mm.
overall. And that that's where a lot of like Verona's worries and stuff around Melissa kind of come from in a way. Um, so it is just kind of funny to me that like Lucy seems to have a type because the second Verona walks out of her life, she accidentally adopts Melissa.
Adopt a surrogate.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like because you're right. That stuff like Lucy's the one who kind of really challenges Melissa, calling herself a cripple, um,
Mm.
which is good because like ironically, Melissa is kind of using that as like a crutch or a bit of an excuse to yeah, like get out of stuff and not like push herself.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like Lucy is letting her into this world, but very much like on the way saying, "Hey, stop doing this shitty thing that you're doing."
Yeah. It's yeah. They're a good match and Melissa's wonderful, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, yeah. New
um
Verona should be a lot of fun.
yeah. So yeah, Lucy approaches Bracken and starts to talk with him and attempts to keep things very chill while he is pushing her buttons as hard as he can.
Yeah, he's pretty much hostile from the get go. But like, really, the point of this segment is kind of showing you why he's like that.
Yeah.
Especially like when we learn about his little brother. That's definitely the moment where you're like, oh, okay, this is somebody doing something for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean he's clearly being an asshole, but on the plus side, it makes Melissa seem more reasonable in comparison. So again, another win. Um,
Yeah, true, true.
but yeah, but yeah,
I mean,
Lucy does. Mm,
also, I was going to say, what's funny about like, Lucy potentially just gathering like all the other people like Verona and stuff. Um, it feels like a very Jasmine thing too. This is more of something we'll bring
hmm.
up in the next chapter, but you can really see the Kenneteers in their parents.
Yeah, isn't that fun? Yeah, definitely, definitely. But yeah, Lucy does really well here. Obviously, yeah, like this chapter with Lucy really, I really thought back to early story Lucy a lot, and like one of the things we were really worried about with early story Lucy was how quickly she felt like she was slipping into violent tendencies, and then obviously she kind of made a few intentional decisions to step away from that, and then we have scenes like this where like she is attacked by Bracken here, and keeps her cool the whole way through. And sure, it's a situation where she can't like go all out and flip out on him, but like I don't know, yeah, the fact that she keeps her cool so well in this situation, it's just good work,
Yeah.
great work by Lucy.
Well, I started to get really worried at the start of this because we already talked
Mm,
about how like Lucy chasing the perps in her last chapter was very much like, oh, Lucy is now the policewoman of Kennet,
yeah,
magically speaking.
yeah,
And she very much opens this interaction with like she's asserting her authority, like threatening to sort of beat him up and take him back, and like
mm,
very much like matching his violent energy with her own. And like as it sort of started, I was going, oh, like oh shit, this is not what you think Lucy would want to be doing.
mm,
Uh and then Bracken sort of starts to bring up some of the stuff we were talking about a few weeks ago
yes.
with like how the
He's
Undercity,
yeah.
well, they don't have rights basically, and
Well, and he specifically calls her a cop, right? And I think that's
yeah,
really interesting because I think that is a point of self reflection for her. She says, no, I prefer to think of myself as a social worker. But she really is a lot more measured after that
yeah.
happens, right?
Yeah, basically Bracken breaks the fourth wall a bit, and it helps her calm down.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, because I mean, this is the thing. I think the moment where Lucy really starts to get it from his perspective is the part where he sort of calls her out for targeting him, and like I think it's a really fair comparison. Like if you look at the Undercity, he challenges like who gave her authority to be the witch in charge, and I think that that's a really fair thing for an Undercity
Yeah.
person to kind of fight against because like, yeah, we've talked about this. The Undercity sprung up. They're just kind of getting lumped under Kennet's territory and having to follow Kennet's rules. They don't have representation on the council. We just had a whole extra material about all the people who get votes on the council. Wasn't anyone from
Yeah.
the Undercity on there. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, they have no representation. They had no say on what rules were here when they were born into it, or into a violent mirror of it. Um, eh, yeah, like I almost I can't see any way for this to go well that doesn't involve some of the Undercity people getting to get proper spots on the council. Like
Yeah.
unless
But I
until the
think
vice
that's.
principal is sitting, yeah,
Mm,
like next to Toad Swallow and Miss and all that. Like
yeah.
I don't know that there's a way forward.
Yeah, but I think that's in the process of happening. Like,
Yeah,
clearly, people like Freak and Squeak, or is it Gashwood who's like selling stuff? I think, um,
and Cherry Pop.
and Cherry. Yeah, sure. But like, they're clearly kind of integrating into the Undercity. Not to mention, Verona and like Tash and Matthew, who spend a lot of time there. But like, they're clearly the lines are getting blurrier. So I think it is in progress in a nice way.
Yeah, but like so far the progress is Gash using his more privileged position to open a business there. And
Hmm.
like Freak and Squeak weren't quite members and they've just sort of gone there for power, but they kind of have an out. But the thing is, if Freak and Squeak get in trouble in the Undercity, they can go to the Overcity and they'll be fine. And that's not
Yeah.
true for anyone else down there.
Yeah, it's a good point. Jalzal also says in chat, like the progress is in one direction. Like there's nobody from the Undercity that's coming into the
Yeah.
Overcity. And I guess Bracken is the first example of that.
Yeah, Bracken's going to be this super interesting sort of precedent case that we're starting. Because, like, the thing is, like, Lucy sort of opens with a lot of stuff saying, like, oh, you're from the Undercity, you're just, like, violent inherently. And
Ooh.
yeah, that's we sort of start to crack through that. I think because even Bracken has internalized that and accepts it when she first says it, but by the end, it's very much like, oh, we can get you to fit in here, and you've got to do it for your brother. Like clearly, Bracken has tried to bring his brother here for safety, and he wants him to go to this school. Like what Bracken wants for Bag is just like a nice peaceful life, and he's willing to, you know, go along with that. And it's just like, yeah, so like the idea that, these people are just from the Undercity are inherently different, I think is already
Yeah.
starting to be eroded.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and I mean, like, I can't help but link this to fighting Charles because, like, the Undercity, like, how I imagine the Undercity, right, is like it's like Charles and Liz's powers that are kind of shaping the Undercity that replaces Kennet. And so like the violence of the Undercity presumably largely comes from the fact that it's like Charles's hub that's causing this knot. So the idea that, Lucy can beat Bracken not through more violence, but by like winning him over and making him peaceful, like that's just, that first drop in the water of just like weakening Charles's effects on the area. But, like, if they can make
Mm,
peace with the Undercity and bring it under their, like, wing with Kennet or, not under the wing, but, like, equal with Kennet, make it a more peaceful, stable place that's just less violent, that's kind of
mm,
beating Charles a little bit in a way. It's
yeah.
like one of these tiny bits of coup and claim that could be important when it matters.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. It's a complex political situation, isn't it? We'll have to see
Yeah.
how it plays out. But you're right. The Undercity, like, we learn how many how many people the family man has kind of in his region, right? And it's a lot. It's 300 to 600 later. And it's kind of like, shit, this is a faction that is large enough to really make a difference. Um,
Yeah.
so it's pretty clear that the way that this story is going to progress, we're going to need some resolution between Kennet and the Undercity, and there are going to be lines drawn and sides drawn between Charles and Kennet and the Undercity, and somehow that's going to play out. I think it's very interesting to start thinking about how we can get to a positive resolution there, and potentially have the Undercity be on Team Kennet here.
Yeah. And I just can't see a way that that doesn't weaken Charles, which I like, because
Yes.
this has been a story about cooperation and collaboration from day one. So the idea that they beat, the violence incarnate by making peace in his domain,
Yeah.
just feels like a great opening salvo.
Yeah, I like that. It also makes me think, um, potentially one of the reasons why the stuck arounds tend to violence is Charles is the Carmine, and this
Yeah,
is his area, right? So like the two, you're right. The two feel very much combined. Like if you can see the stuck arounds, for example, as more than just violent, that is inherently kind of detracting from Charles.
yeah, because like the way I see Undercities working, like I don't think all Undercities are the same as Kennet's. Like it's sort of the thing that is causing the Undercity affects like the flavor of how it's mirrored.
Mm.
So part
Have
of
we got a
Kennet's whole thing,
confirmation of that? I'm trying to figure out if this is headcanon or if this is confirmed.
I think like I'm mostly just basing this off how Bristow described the Undercities he saw in like
Yeah,
Arc 6,
yeah,
and they were quite
okay,
different.
yeah,
And same with like Tashlet's brother.
yeah,
Um, and I just sort of the way this world works, I don't think Wildbow would limit himself to all Undercities being too similar.
mm,
Um, yeah, to be right. Yeah, assuming that that is like the way it works, and it's sort of what's causing it affects the way the axes are flipped.
mm,
Like you can see that the increase in violence is just because Charles is at the center of it, and then like the way it's propping up as Kennet is being emptied has to do with I think the way that Ken died and Liz replaced him. Um,
mm,
like I think there's probably a way to tie every core aspect of like under Kennet to something to do with Charles and or Liz. Um,
yeah. That's interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I wonder if we'll get confirmation that that's the case, because that will really strengthen the idea of how to take down Charles just to being, you know, don't be violent to the Undercity.
Yeah. And I mean, like, sort of as an extension on that, I really love how this,
Mm,
sort of creates a duality between Lucy and Verona in terms of how they're like, how their themes are interacting with the Undercity. Like, Verona is very much diving in there and getting amongst it and exploring herself there. Whereas now Lucy is very much establishing this trend of wanting to lift the Undercity up. Um, and I think that that's such a great metaphor for both the way they've been interacting, like with each other, and just like where they both are on their own journeys. Like it's very fun how the Undercity is fitting so well into both of their own stories.
yeah. Strong theming. I mean, that's how it
Yeah,
works, right? Makes it all work quite nicely. Um, so yeah, Lucy gets Bracken on side ish, and he starts to elaborate more on what's going on. The foreman and the family man are definitely bad news So Lucy sets up a meeting to get more info on the family man a little bit later.
Yeah, and the foreman is still very much like he's a. Everyone's like, he's not great. He's a problem, but he's not the problem, and he's not aggressively a problem. I continue to not. Ever since we had that thing from Verona where she's like, "Yeah, we'll evict him later." I'm sitting here. I'm like, yeah, the
Yeah.
foreman's going to be so much worse than we think.
Or even he will just like the time it takes to deal with the family man might mean we get to the point where we need to set up the Undercity Council, and the foreman is still around, and so has enough
Exactly.
power to vive respond and really cement himself. Like, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like he's that worst kind of problem because he's entrenched and he's productive enough that you can't really afford to get rid of him right now. Like he's not as problematic as a family man, but he's just such a problem.
yes, but a problem you can live with, the worst kind of
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
um,
Like the family man is clearly being set up as like at least this arc, maybe next arc's like baddie, but like
yeah,
I'm pretty confident at the end of this week that we're about to enter confrontations with the family man pretty soon in the story.
yeah.
Whereas the foreman's going to be around pissing me off for a much longer time.
Yeah. Yeah, the family man has a lot of people on his team, right? Like a
Yeah,
huge amount. The biggest faction in the Undercity. Is that right? I think so.
pretty sure. Yeah.
Which, yeah, just like the potential for this to go so badly is really high.
it
Because it's like six
yeah.
people maybe versus 4 to 600, right? Like it's not good odds.
I mean, that's where it being a kind of stealth op would come in. But yeah, like they've got to go in and try and assassinate a dude who's like a godling. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the other interesting thing here is like I'm still rocking my theory that part of the reason these four leaders have come up in Undercanet and are like kind of transforming is because they're representative of like the Ken components. Like they're the sort of central hubs of what
Yeah.
Undercanet stands for. And that just makes me really confused about how you could just defeat him. Like, I don't know that just killing him will be an option in that way. Like, if he's being tied to Liz or tied to the sort of foundation of Undercanet, it seems weird that they could just like cut off his head and he wouldn't like get immediately replaced or reborn or something.
I don't know. I feel like if you killed in a hypothetical world where Ken could come back to life, if you killed the family man and then brought Ken back, maybe Ken just wouldn't have that component to him anymore, you know?
Right, but just killing the family man, like I don't see a way that he doesn't just get replaced because like the way
Yes,
under
true.
Canet works, like it's feeding off this energy. Um, like they almost need to more be fighting what he stands for and how he got this fucking huge cult.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think it's both, right?
well, yeah,
That
exactly. But it
yeah,
reminds me of John, right? Like there was that whole thing where you like to bind or kill John, you need to like cut him off from his whole power source. Like it's really hard to complete the
yeah.
circle around John. Well, it was. And like I feel like it's going to be the same with the family man. Like it'd be weird to me if you can just like complete a circle and cut him off because I think he's being woven into the fabric of the Undercity in a pretty tangible way.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he has sprung into existence and is kind of accelerating proves that, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
clearly something feeding him that will feed something if he dies.
And I think so. The other thing with the family man, right, is so if we're going with this assumption that the violent side of the Undercity is sort of largely thanks to Charles being in the middle. If the rest of it has stuff to do with Liz and like whatever the fuck she's cooking up, like we need to check in with Liz. And I know the
Mm,
characters have been avoiding it, but like if the Undercity is kind of like Liz doing stuff, then like the fact that that's manifesting as like sex cults, like even if you take out Charles as a violent influence, this place is still incredibly like hierarchical and cruel. And
mm.
like is Liz okay? Is she choosing like what the? We need to check in with Liz.
Maybe Liz has retired and is starting a family, and that's why the family man exists.
Then
Maybe
we
it's
need to
really
get her to
nice.
stop.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Um, yeah, as Bracken leaves, Lucy tells Melissa to keep an eye on him, and Melissa's like, "I was already going to do that," and I'm just kind of like, Melissa, you definitely should be a part of the team. I'm very on team Melissa. This. this chapter.
Melissa and Bracken is a pairing that I can't wait to like follow as we move forward because I think
Mm.
they're both
Are they a ship
so.
that you're shipping?
Oh, no shipping, no, just as like a like the blind leading the blind in a way that I think is
Yeah.
going to work kind of way. Like I'm weirdly optimistic about how much they're going to be able to help both of each other while also kind of not being the person you'd immediately think would be good for the other in that way.
Mm. Mm.
I know Melissa ships Melissa and Bracken, so like I don't want to rule it out, but I just it's going to be a fun dynamic because they're both such toxic people who might actually be able to help each other.
Yeah. Yeah. What a dream team. But yeah, so Lucy meets up with the some of the council to discuss the impending doom of the family. Um,
Yeah, and I love like as they're sort of leaving. Part of the reason this whole thing with Bracken ends is like this lady who's one of the like yard watchers, which I guess is a job in Canada. I was very confused about this, but like anyway, like this woman comes up and she really sells to Bracken how nice Lucy was being because this lady just will not hear them out at all. Like she's like, you were fighting, rah, rah, rah," and Lucy's like, no, 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 you're misunderstanding. And then Bracken's like, no, you're misunderstanding. And then Melissa's like, no, you're misunderstanding. And she just doesn't hear any of them out. And it's like, for me, this was the moment where I was like, okay, I think Bracken must be saying how good Lucy was to him here because this woman is just really
yeah.
setting an example of what not to do.
Yeah. 100%. Definitely not gonna accept any shenanigans, which is Bracken's whole vibe. Um, but yeah, in this meeting with Miss and Verona, Verona actually lets Lucy step up a bit, and it's like, oh, they're actually, you know, being nice and supportive to each other.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to how Lucy's been taking Rook's advice and not like pushing Verona too much. And then I think the moment she actually wins Verona over in this is the point where she makes it very clear that she's not criticizing Verona's capabilities. Like she understands she can, but like she wants Verona to have this nice thing and she just needs her to trust her.
Yeah,
And it's basically like word for word what Verona has said to Lucy dozens of times throughout this story.
yeah,
And like you could see the moment where Verona's sort of frowning but accepts it. It's because she realizes that like Lucy is just asking for exactly the same thing that Verona keeps asking her for, and it would be a dick move not to do it, and that she does trust Lucy. So it's like a great moment of Lucy having sort of learnt how to speak to Verona, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Which is nice. I mean, feels like a bit of mending the rift vibes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's Lucy asking Verona to do stuff in the same way Verona hates having to ask people to do for her. So it's like, yeah, helping to even things out in a healthy way.
Yeah. Um, Doyle arrives to this meeting with Bracken, Bag, and Matthew, and exposits even more on the Fam Bam Man.
Yeah, and this is the part. This started to get a bit real for me. My town made the news this year
Mm,
for there was a big sex cult here, and they got rid of them. And the structure of that sex cult, while a lot smaller, was very similar to what's being described here. This got very concerningly real. This is a very uh the structure of the family men's thing holds up.
mm, mm. I feel bad talking about the line that I enjoyed next, which is Verona making a crack about how he will become a fucking god, which I just thought was a good line. But you're right, it is very real.
It is still funny. I think I was just sort of reeling from the fact of learning that this was in my town. So I was just a bit like hypersensitive.
Mm, mm.
But that is like a hilarious line, and the whole divine aspect to this is really fascinating.
Yeah,
I love the way this universe makes stuff like that real. Like the leader of a cult kind of being worshipped to the point that he gets a little bit divine. Just like one as soon as I read it, I was like, oh yeah, of course. Like we should have
yeah,
called that.
yeah. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I gotta say, of all the types of like horror that Wabo dabbles in, I think the pregnancy horror always kind of gets me. Like, because there's conversations about like in this part how the pregnancies are accelerating effectively to kind of be a loose countdown to something that's going to be, they're going to birth 100 babies and it's going to be some big thing, like a big ritual.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is like. maybe it's the fact that pregnancies are kind of inherently parasitic, and that's kind of creepy, or like the fact that pregnancy and birth is a very natural process, and this is like a perversion of it. But like, I don't know. Whenever Wabo gets into messing around with the pregnancy body horror stuff, it just really gets me.
Yeah, I think pregnancy horror like works so well
Mm,
because the scariest thing about pregnancy to me, obviously, is a dude, so this is not
mm,
like my area of expertise, but like the fact that it's like a quote unquote like normal bodily process, like
mm.
this is just this crazy huge temporary change your body can go through that puts all kind of stresses on it, and it's something like we kind of all experience, like, for a lot of us indirectly, but um like, yeah, there's this uncanny valley aspect to pregnancy of just like, because it is kind
Yeah,
of something you expect to see.
it's become so obviously it's very normalized because it's the fundamental thing
Yeah,
that humans do, right? Is make more humans, like the mammalian drive.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but you're right. It is like it's so normal, but also when you stop and think about it, so weird and almost inherently horrifying.
Yeah, like I, everyone knows that like pregnancy is incredibly stressful on the body. So
Yeah,
pregnancy horror, I think, is yeah just playing off those aspects, and it's just you're right. It always makes you so uncomfortable, and it's what
yeah,
Alien was kind of centered around. Like
mm,
that's why it's such a popular movie.
yeah, 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 yeah. Creepy stuff. But yeah, this chapter ends with Lucy venturing into the Undercity to scout out the family man's turf and just kind of making herself known that she's here to help.
Yeah, which I don't know about this.
About the fact that she's so actively is like, "Hey, I'm around."
Yeah, just like that's not going to make them like. I feel like you want to go for a sneak attack,
Yes.
assassination in the shadows sort of vibe with these
Yeah, definitely.
this area, and I don't know that fucking walking his boundary, being like, hey, you know, threatening the cult directly, like it just
Yeah, but
feels like a tactical error.
I mean, and it is a tactical error, I think, really. But the thing that's great about it is Lucy does it not because of the tactics of it, but because she wants to give.
She wants to help. Yeah,
Yeah, she wants to give people that are caught up in this cult like an out, and I think that's what like it is very. It's very Lucy, right? Like
yeah.
she is going to deliver justice, and she has enough faith in herself that she can do that, even if they know that she's coming. So
Also,
she's
I think
going
we've
to, yeah,
Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, I think we've also heard that, like, from a karmic standpoint, it is good karma to,
mm,
uh, like, announce
declare
plans and
your
stuff in that way.
attacks.
I
Yeah,
remember Alexander and Bristow talking about that a lot.
yeah,
So, it's probably good karma. I think you're right. It's better in that it's not about, like, killing the leader, but about actually fixing the cult, which is what I was just saying it probably needs to be. Like, this is why I would
yeah.
do well
Like
in this
this is the
world.
non-violent. Like we were talking about how they need to find a way to not just resolve everything with violence with the Undercity. So
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and yeah, if we kill the family man, I'm sure he'll just get replaced. Like what they need to do is turn his followers around.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, no, you're right. You turn me around on this. I think my vision of like a classy sneak
an
attack,
assassination.
yeah, is probably not going to actually fix the problem.
Yeah. But yeah, then the chapter ends with this moment of Lucy learning the guitar, and it's just really sweet.
Yeah, it's a really nice moment. It's such a delivery on what she was talking about in 14.6 about like moving forward and healing. Like and that
Yeah.
was the chapter where she got this guitar. Like this is her, even in this horrible undercity around this cult, like taking a moment for herself to just like, yeah, move on a bit.
Yeah, and I'm very excited for the extra material where Wildbow commissioned somebody to sing this full song in character as Lucy. So
Oh, yeah. But if he finds a good Lucy voice actor, we could also use them for something.
sure,
But that I'm not meant to talk about. Yeah,
good tease.
um, yeah, I at this moment, like, I think it's a great ending to the chapter 2 because it's really like this chapter has really sort of been demonstrating to us like how Lucy is healing now rather than like fighting. Um,
Mm,
and like this is her moment like to take that inwards and really focus on herself. But like throughout this whole chapter, like, she was sort of just taking a moment to be with Wallace, and then it was all about like actually helping Bracken not fight him. And then here, this is very much just her sort of, yeah, taking some time for herself. And it really lets you leave the chapter with this sense of like, okay, Lucy is moving forward in a good, healthy way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's nice. It really starts to feel like she's coming out of the real pit that she was in arc 14.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so next, playing in part 15-4, we are with Avery. So Avery and her mum are waiting at the bus stop for Verona to arrive.
Yeah. And I love how this sort of opens with a bit of a spiel about how Thunder Bay is not like a major city.
Mm,
Because I think it's funny, I've internally mapped it to a city that is a very similar size in terms of population, that's about an hour away from me.
mm.
And even then, sometimes when I picture Avery zipping around to the city, the word city just makes me fucking put like Manhattan in my head.
Yeah,
And I'm picturing her like fucking zipping around the roofs of
Spider-Maning around. Yeah, I've been
yeah.
playing PS4 Spider-Man lately, so swinging around the rooftops of New York.
But like, yeah, not maybe not quite Manhattan, but even something like Sydney. Like as you start to get like out more towards like Ultimo, where it's not all giant skyscrapers, but we're still talking like 10-story buildings
Yeah,
and all this big industry that like I just don't think actually exists in a city this size. And so it's really nice that even though there's like a logical part of my head that is like, oh, this place is just like Tamworth. There's like this other part of me that keeps picturing a major city, and I was really grateful that Wildbow's just like taking some extra time to really remind us, like, this isn't Brockton Bay. This is just like a more spread out city.
yeah, yeah. Um, I really liked Avery describing Liberty as Kerry's ideal babysitter. I thought that was hilarious and very, like, 100% on point.
Yeah,
Um,
well, the fact that Kelsey immediately perfectly describes what Liberty would be
yeah,
like kind of like I think Avery even says that might have worked too well because
yeah,
she's just like, oh, there'll be fireworks and the garden will need to be reseeded and we'll get noise complaints. And I was like, oh, fuck, that is
yeah. I
absolutely
mean,
Liberty,
exactly
yes.
correct. Yeah. Yeah, Kelsey is wonderful. What a wonderful parent Kelsey is.
Yeah, it's almost crazy to me that this is the same woman who let Avery end up where she was before this story started.
I mean, you
Like,
can kind of see it, right? Like the thing that jumps
yeah,
out to me about this is it really does seem like Kelsey is putting so much effort into her parenting now because of that wake up call. And she's doing very well as a result, but to the extent that she doesn't seem to have any of her own life outside of it, right?
yeah, but I kind of get the impression the not having a life outside of it part was kind of true before then too.
Mm,
It was just like I think the work and the whole family. I mean, maybe the fact is it's just now that there's not Kerry and Declan that there's just so much more bandwidth.
mm,
Um, because Avery doesn't have to fight for attention in the same way she did at the
yeah,
start of the story.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I suppose really maybe that's the thing, right? Is it's not that Kelsey was a bad mom; it was just that she was just overwhelmed and like in a
yeah.
situation where she couldn't do well.
And obviously Declan and I mean Avery was the one who commanded the least or required the least attention, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so obviously we also get introduced to the idea of Verona being exhausted, which is a running theme through the chapter, and I guess we'll talk about it the most at the end. But this is one of those chapters where Wildbow points something out, and we see it a few times, then it pays off at the end of the chapter, and that's always just a fun way for a chapter to go.
yeah. It's good storytelling, and it also just really made me appreciate how valuable. Because at first I was quite surprised when we started doing the Thunder Bay holiday, from not Verona's perspective, because like in my head I was like, I want to see Florin from Verona's perspective, like I want to see all
Mm,
this stuff we've seen from Avery, but Walbo's a bit smarter and he's much more properly focused on these characters, and what we're getting to see is Verona from a bit more of an objective like perspective, because I think it's fair
mm.
to say that both Verona and Lucy are a little bit too close to the whole situation to like properly um evaluate Verona.
Yeah, and the tension and baggage between them at the moment makes that
Yeah,
harder as well, right? Like Lucy's
yeah,
actively trying to not be as critical or I don't know what the right word is.
involved.
Meddling,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like Avery is actually just a really good chance for us to see Verona from a perspective that's just like a little bit more objective.
Mm,
Um, and like Avery kind of immediately ties how Verona is coming across to how Avery was after the Forest Ribbon Trail, which I really enjoyed as a sort of point of comparison because it, like the whole vibe I've gotten of Verona going into the Undercity is, oh, it's really intense for her and there's some really bad parts, but overall it seems to be pushing her like exploration of herself in a good direction.
mm,
And that's kind of what the Forest Ribbon Trail was too. Like that was kind of in some ways an objectively terrible thing Avery went through. Um, but it got her Snowdrop. It sort of helped her become a finder, which she now loves. Like I can't remember if Avery has actually said this, but I imagine if asked, Avery would make the same decisions again. Like I don't think she regrets the Forest Ribbon Trail. Like it was an
mm.
awful experience, but
But she
um,
meant Snowdrop.
yeah. Like, not that, you needed to go through that pain to get where you are. Like, I'm not saying that nonsense, but it's very much like she went through it and parts of it were bad, but it ended up being worth it in the end. And I can kind of see the Undercity stuff ending up like that for Verona.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting comparison.
But yeah, it also speaks to how just Verona's not in a good spot because Avery was not in a good spot right after the
Well, yeah,
FRT.
that a very very bad spot. A spot that has stuck with her for a long time.
Yeah, I mean she's still Vejo, right?
Mm. And the nightmares and that kind of stuff. I mean, we don't hear about them, but I'm assuming she still has the occasional nightmare.
Yeah, given that the wolf showed up in Arc 13 like that, right? Or Arc 12, you tend to assume, yeah.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, Verona joins them, and they head back to Avery's place. Verona has brought a special guest with her on this journey, Cherry Pop, which is a fun surprise.
I can't believe we weren't begging her to bring Cherry Pop. Like, as
I
soon as
know.
Cherry Pop popped, I was like, oh,
Didn't
of
even think
course,
of it. Yeah.
yeah. Pop and drop, the Horseman ride again. Fucking love
Yep. The
this.
dream team. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, I absolutely love the fact that Cherry Pop's here.
Yeah, I love the way that like this is a pretty serious chapter, all things considered. Like
Mm.
most of what Avery and Verona talk about throughout all this is quite heavy, both emotionally and lore stuff. And like Cherry Pop
Wise.
and
Yeah.
Snowdrop really function in this chapter as our kind of escape for like all these little happy moments. Like whenever things get intense, in whether it's in the upcoming council meeting or their emotional chats here, it will quickly cut to like Cherry Pop and Snowdrop just doing ridiculous dumb shit, and it's like a way to
Yeah.
not let you get bogged down in it. And what's great is that's also what it's doing for Verona and
Yes,
Avery.
that's
Like,
happening in story as well as on a
yeah,
metatextual level, which is very fun.
yeah. Like I love how this story will often do that. Like, Walbo will be like, "Oh, this is good for the characters, and the audience probably needs it too."
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Can I ask though? And I'm asking
Mm.
you and the chat. There's this
Yeah.
moment where Verona like gives a big sort of does table talk to Avery where she says you've got to cross your Q's and dot your J's, and Avery's like, yeah, don't worry, like it's taken care of, blah blah. And the
Yeah, what
fuck
is
were they
she
talking about?
referencing? Whose
What is
name?
cross?
I'm trying to think of what starts with Q and J, and I can't think of anything.
What is cross? Yeah, what are the Q's and J's? Does
It
chat
reminds
know?
me of. It reminds me of. I don't know if you had the same thought. It reminds me a lot of that moment in Shrek 2, which we've just talked about on The High Ground, which is a Patreon bonus show. If you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/doofmedia. But where Donkey refers to Lillian, the Queen of Far Far Away, as Mrs. Q. And we were confused by that for a moment until we realized that that's just because she's the queen. She doesn't have
Yeah,
a
yeah,
surname. But I was trying to figure out, like, what's the Q and J that Verona is referencing?
yeah. Okay, so Walbo's saying it's just a fun play on like cross your T's and dot your I's.
Right.
I was wondering if there was like more specific, like the Q and J meant something.
Mm.
But yeah, okay. But I'm okay. I think I was just
It's just Verona
overanalyzing
being a bit
this.
of a
Yeah, just Verona being quirky. Okay.
different. Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, Verona and Avery start talking about Kennet, and they're trying to establish what they can do to prevent it from fully sinking. But I don't know, they don't come up with any great ideas.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is like a nice sort of section for just sort of summarizing everything we know about the nodding and what we can do about it. Like, I don't know if this section is as much about idea generation as it is about just like f- Walbo doing a solid for us, the readers, and sort of saying, yeah, here's kind of everything that's happening in a nutshell because it's all been spread out and pieced together individually. Like, it's just a nice summary.
Yeah. Yeah. But let's talk about the ideas. So there's a few ideas they come
Yep.
up with. Strengthening the shrines, making them bigger, doing more shrines, doing domain or lordship rituals. And I think all of those are pretty quickly dismissed. And then the
Yeah.
one that they kind of land on at the end is the idea of making shrines in the Undercity, which I think is a very cool idea, but like those shrines are high, high risk, right? Like, because you need to have a number of shrines spread out, presumably kind of matching their locations or something, or
Yeah.
augmenting their locations in the above city.
Yeah, I
But
think the idea is that the ones on top are holding things down, but the ones on bottom are then holding it up, so it all kind of stays as level as it can. Yeah,
yeah, which feels like it could be done eventually, but they're so far away from that because that would mean it needs to be across like all the territories, as well as some places that aren't really territories that are just like where the stuck rounds hang out. And
yeah,
like it feels like the political situation of the Undercity is so far away from that point. By the time we get to the point where that's feasible, I don't know.
might
It's
be too late.
exactly or like yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. This is the thing. This is where it's going to be really interesting because this just slots so perfectly in what we were talking about with Lucy,
yes,
like last chapter. Like the idea that this means they're going to need to get the Undercity to a point where it's stable enough that they could do these shrines, and also like yeah, it's hard not to see this as mapping to the idea of like the Kennet boundary at this point, like the original perimeter from the start of the story. I assume that's just in shreds right now.
mm,
Negligible, doesn't matter anymore.
yeah,
So these 16 perimeter spirits essentially represent the new version of the perimeter. And so it's kind of like you're drawing the same circle around the Undercity, which kind of legitimizes it in the same way. Like
yeah.
it feels like it's bringing the Undercity and saying it is an equal opposite half to Kennet, and that there's no way that can't tie into getting them better representation on the council and properly acknowledging them as an equal ish space.
Yeah, although I just had the same thought as Jalzal, which is if you go into the Undercity and like walk out of town, what happens? Like, can you do that? Is like, what's what's outside of the Undercity?
I mean, it might just map to the real world, right? So you just end up back
Back in regular
the the
the
real world.
overworld. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I gotta stop
Yeah,
calling it the real world. That's so offensive to the Undercity
yeah.
people who I'm trying to stick up for.
Shame on you. um, but yeah, so yes. So Avery and Verona are interrupted by the Lord here, who summons them for a meeting, and on the way there they talk about friendships and relationships and all that juicy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big chat here. Uh, I, I do think it's kind of funny that as they're getting summoned to the council, Verona kind of like has a go at Avery for not having her version, like the Thunder Bay part of keeping tabs done.
Mm,
And I just love that because I think we did learn that Wildbow originally planned to include Toronto in that extra
Thunder
material, but
Bay.
it was too sorry, yeah, but it was too fucking epic.
Yeah.
So people are talking about Toronto in the chat. That's throwing me off. But yeah, this feels like Wildbow kind of throwing in a nice little meta reference to the fact he didn't get Thunder Bay
Done in
into
time.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's good.
because there is like a big section coming up where Avery kind of has to pause time, or no, I think she just does a quiet room, and she like explains who everyone is to Verona, and it's the sort of thing where like that may not have been needed if we'd had that keeping tabs
Yeah.
thing already.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that I found really interesting about this segment is Verona really opens up to Avery a lot, right? Like
Yeah,
Avery and Verona are close, obviously, but I kind of had the impression that Verona wasn't willing to be this vulnerable to the other Kenneteers, which now that I see this makes me think, oh shit, that's actually just Lucy, isn't it? Like Verona just can't open up to Lucy, and it's really kind of heartbreaking. Or maybe the positive way of framing it is Verona has grown and is able to be a bit more vulnerable with her friends.
um, yeah. I For me, I think it comes back to like what we've talked about with Lucy, where it's all the particularly the recent baggage and just the fact that she's so innately tied into stuff. I'm almost right back to remember when Matthew finally talked to Verona last week, and it was a bit like
Yeah.
you could tell the reason Matthew was willing to do it with Verona is because it was like, you won't make a big deal out of this, and she was close enough to understand, but not close enough that she would like it would
Have to
change.
take active action or yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And like, obviously we compared them all this week and it applies here because like Verona is always looking for the same thing. She doesn't want somebody who like she even complains here. She's like, "Oh, I've hurt things with Tashlet by asking her to be my familiar. Like that was stupid." And like Verona can't help but whenever she opens up about stuff like this, hate herself for doing it later
Yeah.
because it interferes with how she interacts with them after that. So Avery I think gets a lot of traction out of the fact that Avery is now all the way in Thunder Bay. And so
Mm,
Verona can come here and kind of unload and it might affect the rest of this week or whatever, but then they're going to go back to just communicating online and via phone calls. And I think that will be like in Verona's head, that's going to be easier to handle.
mm.
So in my head, the biggest thing it's really saying is just Avery lives further away.
Yeah, I guess that's not much of a marker of anything, huh?
Yeah, I think it's just Avery is close enough that she is going to understand all the people that are being talked about and kind of get it, but
But geographically far enough that she can't
yeah, there won't
interfere
be the
too much.
awkward stuff. Like remember, Verona was even upset for opening up to Jeremy at one
Yeah,
point, where
yeah,
that like seemed to go fantastically well. So it might actually be really good for Verona to just make this like something she does once a quarter or something, just where she can go and fucking unload on
yeah,
Avery and have an outlet that works for her because it's not too close to the situation but not too far.
yeah. I hope she doesn't regret this conversation. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I know where I'd put my money. It's not where I want my money to go, but
Mm,
um, yeah, I mean, it reminds me like we'll get to Sylvia in a bit, I suppose, but Sylvia gives off some of these similar-ish vibes to Verona.
mm,
Um, just like Sylvia very much gives off that vibe of having many friends but not many close ones, and I think that's because Sylvia's specific way of dealing with a similar-ish issue is that like Sylvia doesn't let herself get too close to people. Um, because she doesn't want to lean on them too much or whatever. But yeah, so that's why she's someone who just has a lot of friends that aren't super close.
mm. Yeah,
But yeah, also, yeah, this is where Avery challenges Verona on calling herself broken, which just like immediately made me think of the whole thing with Melissa and her being like calling herself a cripple. Where
yeah.
I like to see Avery challenging,
Challenging that. Yeah.
yeah, because it. Like this is something obviously like Verona calling herself broken ties into her whole thing with her mask. Like that's something people have talked about a lot.
Mm,
And I think like yeah, this will be really interesting to see because I think we talked about how Verona just stapling her masks together was a sort of temporary half measure, and I still think the staples themselves are, but I'm wondering if fixing her mask and having it go back to normal is like not the solution. I'm thinking particularly of I think it's called like kintsugi, which is that Japanese thing where like when they
yeah.
smash the vases, they repair them with the gold
With the
lines.
gold. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's this whole like thing about how it's like you accept that the cracks are actually part of what makes it like beautiful and like individual.
Mm.
Like that might be the direction for Verona is like accepting that those cracks there. Because with her mask already, doesn't like cool purple laser lightning poke out of them. Like it's like accepting that the cracks don't make her broken. They're what like make her cool and make her her.
Mm.
Um, so like maybe staples aren't the answer, but there's going to be some sort of magical, cool shit holding her mask together. But the cracks aren't a problem; they're
Part of
part of
it.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Um, I found it very funny that Verona fucks up jumping on the moon reflections while
yeah,
we're in
yeah.
this section, by the way. Like, it just is delightful to me because Verona is so competent at the practice stuff, but just completely whiffs this jump.
Yeah,
Oh, it's hilarious.
it really speaks to just how each Kennetia has their own strengths. Um,
Yeah.
and physical uh stuff is just not Verona's. I mean, it's blatantly reminiscent. Like, obviously, we had Verona bring Cherry along for this, and it reminded me so much of like Cherry's failure to cross that river in her interlude, like 12.A.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, just that moment of Avery being like, "Yeah, you can totally make this," and she just fucking straight in the
Oh,
drink.
Mirth Strike. Oh, okay, never mind. Mirth Strike pointed out almost a cool theory that got debunked by Marbo in chat. Sad.
Um, but yeah, and if you think about it, Verona and Cherry Pop have a lot in common. They're both petite. They both can't jump over bodies of water.
They
You
both
know,
love chicken nuggets.
yep, they're basically the same person.
Yeah. Forget about Tash. Cherry Pop should be Verona's familiar. So yeah, at the
Oh,
council
both
meeting.
sorry,
Oh,
both best friends with Peckersnot. That's another one.
true. At the council meeting, Anne and Deb are haranguing Nicole Scobie. Avery takes the opportunity to pull Verona aside for a bit of expositing, which is very nice of her.
Yeah, and again, it was handy for me to kind of, especially with not just the new people, but even some of the old ones, get like a bit more of a, uh, just like here is this person's one paragraph summary sort of vibe.
Yeah.
Like it just gives you a different angle on them than like meeting them alongside Avery gets you.
Yeah. Yeah. I found this argument between Anne, Deb, and Nicole a little hard to track on my first read. So, as I understand it, here's the recap Nicole purchased an abyssal cow, and the gang is worried that this will bring in abyssal energy, which, like, hasn't even happened yet. They just really don't trust Nicole at all.
Yeah, I mean it. Megafire and some other people on our Discord compared it to like HOA nonsense during my live read, and I just that is such a fucking great link. Like
Mm.
I love that comparison because this is just it's so petty, the inconsistent way the rules are enforced, the way it's all emotional and just becomes personal attacks alongside the pettiness of it. Like my only experience with HOAs is through like HOA subreddits, but this seems to be what they're all about.
Yeah. Well, the ones you hear about, definitely.
Yeah, but like just sort of like this has been the realization for me. It's like, oh shit, these councils that help the Lord, that it's just an HOA for practitioners. Like we saw when the first arrived, like they're the ones who decide whether or not you're allowed to live in the city. Like I can't believe we didn't see it till now. It's just an HOA.
Yeah, I do like that as the analogy for it. I think it works very well.
Yes, and to touch on the abyssal cow that Nicole brought in, so we also get confirmation that that hookup came via the Rosums, who are the people we saw working with the milkmaid. Um,
Yeah, which can we just pause on that for a second? Has the
okay.
milkmaid graduated from practitioners to cat? Or I don't know if that's a graduation or a regression for the milkmaid, but I guess it's nice. Like the milkmaid isn't milking practitioners anymore. Maybe just
Well,
milking cows. Unless an abyssal
I
cow is a practitioner.
yeah, I was gonna well, not practitioners, just like innocents.
Sure.
Um,
Yes. True. Sorry.
yes, my interpretation was more that because when Raph got there, weren't some of the people starting to moo like cows? I think I
Gross.
I yeah, I think cow might be a very generous term for what
I
Nicole
no.
has bought.
I disagree. I think it's just a cute cow, but instead of like black splotches on its fur, it's just got like holes in it. That's what I'm picturing. But it's very cute. Very cute. Not at all
Okay.
gross.
Okay, yeah, keep dreaming.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, and just like we've got to talk about just how ridiculous this whole thing with Nicole is. Like, it's just it reminded me of watching reality TV. Like, just the way you're shoveling popcorn in your mouth because they're all just clearly pieces of shit and they're all fighting over stupid stuff, and you just can't help but enjoy it, even though it's trash.
It is
Like
fun drama.
Nicole fucking has a go because Anne's husband is cheating on her, and then Anne's like, "Oh, I don't even care," and you're just
Yeah.
shit at your
He
job. Like
still
it's
fucks
just
me good, so what do I care? Is what
yeah,
she says, basically.
it's it was just it was the same vibes as watching like just trashy TV, and I loved it.
We do meet some new council members. We meet Aze, an elemental, Justin Childs, and Nadine, the Gleaner apprentice. We don't have a huge amount to dive into for them, although I found Nadine very interesting because even as an apprentice, Nadine clearly commanded such respect from Anne, which was, I mean, is not something that Anne gives out very frequently. So, yeah, I
Mm.
thought that was very interesting, and I anticipate we'll see more of Nadine, and that will be quite fascinating to see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you think about it, like, so because I remember when we first got introduced to the Abyss and the Ruins in that extra material in Arc 2, we were told that they were kind of like, I think the Ruins is where like immaterial stuff goes to get like recycled. And I think they said the Abyss is where physical stuff goes to get recycled. So
Mm.
Anne's whole thing is diving into the ruins and the abyss, and Nadine's whole thing, like the gleaners, they like break stuff down and kind of sell it as batteries, which is kind of recycling. So
Yeah.
maybe there's just some synergy there.
I mean, you recycle old phone batteries and stuff, so I think that tracks.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not quite linking in my head, but yeah, maybe there is
Mm.
some cool synergy between those two groups.
Mm.
Um, I I really love the idea of the we meet like the child's family, and they're basically like middlemen who walk around dealing with these incarnates.
Mm.
We saw some of those whenever Arc 8, whenever Avery went into
Yeah, in the
um
ruins, wasn't it?
the ruins,
Yeah.
and I remember hearing about that. Like we got told that they were not immortal. I think the word that was used was like inevitable or some shit. Like you can't kill them.
Yeah.
And we didn't really understand exactly what that meant, but like assuming that means you can't like sort of kill them, I guess it makes sense to have a family who kind of interacts with them and tracks them and like, knows
Yeah.
what their deals are. Um,
Yeah.
this is like one of the most interesting practices that I reckon we've heard about in a while now, and that's saying something because there's been a lot of cool ones introduced recently. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just the idea of people running around dealing with these kind of inevitable beings and like being middlemen, helping them find grief or whatever they're after, and helping people who need grief get in contact with them. Um, that's so interesting, and how, like all the good practices, has the potential to be a really good thing, but it's probably being used to do a lot of horrible shit.
Yeah, to do some real shady shit for sure.
Um,
Yeah, you're right.
Gilkey also, we learn more about Gilkey. So moving on from like the new people,
Mm.
um, Gilkey's deal is like horrifying. So he was just like a guy, and somebody fucked up alchemy on him, and so now he like lost his self.
Yeah.
He's a quote unquote selfless person now.
Which
Uh,
seems nice. I like the wordplay there.
yeah, but he's like, this just makes me more fascinated to know stuff about like he does augury. So was he an ex augur?
Mm.
Like, y- you know, and I guess being the victim of alchemy, like we've heard so much about like Jabba, and I think there was like the clock heart girl. Like there's this local
And the
string of alchemists.
in the witch hunter interlude, that was an alchemist, wasn't it? The guy who made his family.
Yeah, but there's been specifically, I remember, because there's been one like direct lineage of alchemists that have been referenced a bunch of times in the story as like creating Jabba and doing some other bad shit around Kennet, and everyone keeps being like, "Oh, it's this one specific group of alchemists,"
Yeah,
and
true.
that always felt like it was leading somewhere, and it's never gone anywhere. And now I'm just like connecting straws. I'm like, hey, Victory of Alchemy, is this the same people? Are they gonna please come into the story now?
Yeah, when are we going to meet
Um,
these crazy Canadian alchemists?
yeah. Oh, and also just the whole concept that things like Gilkey happen to people who overdo alchemy. As we're standing next to Verona, somebody who isn't
Yeah.
known for alchemy or overdoing things. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Um, we should talk about Hugh's involvement in Muss's plan because the impression I got from Basil's interlude was that Hugh was like tapping out of it. But the impression I get here is Hugh is a lot more like playing both sides than I thought, or at least like very much keeping options open.
Yeah, well, because like obviously Millie was there in Basil's interlude at the end. Like she was the one who was originally meant to take that land. So
Yeah.
the Legendres as a unit were clearly involved. And I think Hugh was just pulling a fast one, being like, "I'm not involved. I've just okayed most of my family to be involved, but I'm not doing it myself." Like you're right. He's just clearly fucking, keeping one foot in both buckets.
Yeah, which is very interesting. It means I anticipate we'll have more of a showdown with you soon, which I'm kind of keen for.
Oh yeah, like he has that moment with Cherry Pop
Yes,
later on where it's just like, yeah,
real
fuck this
villain
guy. Yeah,
moment. Yeah,
yeah.
um, yeah,
Um, the other thing I think that comes up here, I think this is the section where Florence starts talking about how, these lordship challenges, they've happened in like a bunch of other places. And the
Mm,
way it's framed makes it, like, very clear, just in case you were still unsure, that this whole master plan is pretty much an overt metaphor for somebody, like, forming a dictatorship. Like,
mm,
he's claiming all the land for him and, like, his crew.
mm,
And you know, lords aren't as accountable in some ways as the judges are. Like, the judges kind of have to follow rules a lot more and, like, you know, try to maintain stability, whereas lords very much seem to decide what things should look like.
mm.
um, and we get, like, these little details, like, oh, I think it was the Gleaners, like, some of the smaller, nicer families are starting to flee this section of Canada because, you know, what, they're fleeing the dictatorship. Like, it's those are, like, classic lead up to a full-on dictatorship, and I love
Yeah.
that that's sort of the direction that we're really taking this in.
Yeah, especially because that kind of inherently paints Charles as the lesser of two evils, the more we lean into that metaphor, right?
Yes and no. I mean, he's the one indirectly enabling Massa.
Yes, true.
But it puts into context, I think it was last week that Avery was talking about cutting a deal with Massa. Like, that seems insane now. Like, it yeah, I know. It's gonna be
Mm.
really fun because you're right, we're tracking 2. We've got Charles on the one hand, and then we've got Massa on the other, and it's like, how do you balance these 2 things? Yeah.
Yeah, how can you find a resolution that you're happy with between those two extremes?
Yeah, both feel so completely undefeatable right now. I
Yeah,
don't understand how the Kennedys can move forward against either of them.
yeah.
Without siding with one of them, that is. Like,
Yes,
if they join Charles to fight Massa, sure. If they join Massa to fight Charles, sure. Neither of those feels like a good idea.
yeah. Um, Anywho, Verona is introduced to the council, um, as is Cherry, and Cherry, as we mentioned, gets a lot of sass from Hugh.
Yeah, fuck him. He calls her a vermin, and then when
Yeah,
Avery's like, "Please don't call my allies vermin, Mr. Legendre," he's like, "We've met them and we know the company they keep. Is there anything else?" And I was like, "Oh, fuck
yeah,
you." Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Speak. You can't talk, Hugh. We know the company you keep, all right? It's fucking Massa. um,
Yeah. Also, that was something I forgot to mention. I love how Nicole, Anne, and Deb got really shitty because Cherry Pop was enjoying their argument, as if that isn't a sign that, like,
yeah,
if Cherry Pop is
exactly.
on this level, you guys need to, like, look in the fucking mirror.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was very funny too. But yeah, like what they're really doing here is just defending Cherry's right to like exist, right? Like the default is just for
Yeah.
Cherry Pop to be murdered, and it's crazy to me that nobody. I guess that's the whole point with practitioners, but like
Yeah.
nobody cares
Nobody
about
speaks up.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's fucked up.
yeah. Anyway, the session wraps up and Avery and Verona leave. Oh, psych! They're pulled back in, and they're there to update the Lord on Avery's secret recon mission.
Yeah. And, like, this is obviously funny because Avery's trying to, like, act like, you know, oh, this is normal, like, getting sucked into the water. This is all going to be fine. And they get fucking yo yoed back. And it even throws her for a loop. Um, actually, sorry, I know I'm jumping back a little bit, but something that really jumped out to me as well is, like, seeing Verona get interviewed by the council from Avery's perspective was really interesting because part of me really
mm,
wanted to be in Verona's head for that to see
mm,
how she was coping, how she felt about everything, like, what she thought of everyone there. But I kind of loved seeing it from Avery's because Avery was just sort of like, oh, she's doing so well, and, you know, she's so cool. And that was so different to how it felt in Avery's head when we saw her. And it's just a real testament to how different the same experience can be in someone else's head.
mm.
Like, I'm sure in Verona's head, she was probably, you know, struggling in her own way just as much as Avery was.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, as they're talking to the Lord, Avery says that she expects Florin to make a play for lordship, which is pretty big, right? Like we were talking about this
Yeah.
before. Avery tells everything that we kind of learned last time, but I don't know. Like if that happens, it's gonna be pretty wild. And also, what side is Avery gonna be on? Like, will she get, or will she even get involved? Which I kind of, my gut is that she will get involved somehow, despite me wanting her to just kind of not get wrapped up in the drama. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about because the current Lord of Thunder Bay does seem a bit passive, but also is an other, and so like it's kind of nice having an other in charge of an area.
Well, it's also yeah, and she's passive, whereas I imagine Florin would be more actively shit. Um,
Yes, true.
but yeah, no, there's probably an argument to be made that by telling the Lord of Thunder Bay this so openly and
Mm.
unpromptedly, she's already
She's
picked
already
a
picked a
side.
side. Yeah, yeah.
I could see someone like Florin claiming that. I don't know. I Part of me thinks there's no way I can see her being able to stay neutral, but I remember we said that a lot about the Kenneteers against Bristow and Alexander, and they did.
They
They
did
sort of redefined.
surprisingly well. Yeah,
Yeah, well, they redefined what neutral was and ended up, winning. So
yeah, killing both teams
yeah,
evenly.
exactly. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. I can't really imagine Avery picking Floren's side, but he has been playing nice with her, and he's
Hmm.
got stuff to offer. Like as I said last week, she was talking about taking Muster's side. If Floren can offer something in terms of helping Kenneth against Charles, like I think she'll have to hear him out at least.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, that's true because the Lord of Thunder Bay is passive, and Florin might be actively shitty, but he would presumably also be actively anti-Charles. So
yep, yep.
maybe not the worst
Um,
thing in the world.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be so interesting. I agree with you. I want Avery to not be involved, but
Mm.
I don't know how that's possible. But then also we've found that out before, so yeah. I think the really the super interesting part of this as well is how Floren's going about it. Like we talked the other week about how what we've really been seeing since we've moved into this new chapter of the story has been practitioners who deal with innocence more than practitioners who deal with others in the world of magic.
Mm.
And Florin is already kind of exemplifying the end game to that, in that he's about to make well, presumably about to make a swing for the lordship, entirely based on the fact that he's won over a huge chunk of the innocent world, and that's going to be a part of his claim. Is I have ties to all the innocent powers in control of this city as well.
Mm.
So I'm super interested to sort of see where this keeps tracking, because it's the innocents are becoming more and more important, but still only as pawns. Whereas before they were an obstacle and a kind of threat to the people we used to deal with. Now they're explicitly something that's being leveraged by those in power or seeking more power.
Yeah, yeah.
And like again, this is another thing I think will be useful for maybe trying to stop Charles. I don't see how, but using the power of innocence to uh, I don't know, do something
Do
seems
some
helpful.
unspecified thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but also just the idea of people like Florin manipulating the innocents
Mm.
um, for his own game. It just feels very right for what this world is.
Mm.
Like if there was a theoretical entertainment channel that pretended it was news and had been brainwashing people in half of America for, generations,
Mm.
like
Theoretically,
that,
yeah.
yeah, like that's the sort of thing that Florin is doing in a different way.
Yeah, well, I think that tracks very much to
Yeah.
Florin's whole manipulator vibe.
Yeah, like he's used financial and social connections to tie himself into all the powers that be in the town. Like that's
Mm.
yeah, and now he's using the fact that the innocents can't be tracked through the Lord to pull power in this other realm, and the innocents don't know what he's doing. He's just doing it for himself.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um, I'm
Also,
excited. Mm.
sorry, in this meeting, Gilkey talks for the Lord a lot.
Yeah, Gilkey has always done that, but you're right.
Yeah,
It's interesting because the Lord can talk. The Lord does speak a few times in this
and it's hard.
session.
It's hard for her to do that, so she doesn't do it much, and I get it. But Gilkey always seems he's just freakishly on her level and on her side, to the point where I don't know. I can't help but think like there must be something else going on here. Like it feels more than just they've been working together for a long time.
Mm.
Like unless that long time, like if we're going to find out Gilkey's been doing this job for like 100 years, like that's all it could be. But
Jaso points something out interesting in chat though that Anne does also do it. So maybe this is just kind of
but
how you have to work with the Lord.
I'm yeah, but Anne often gets it wrong. Like Anne
Yeah,
keeps
true.
getting the Lord keeps usually having to come in to like correct things, whereas like Gilkey seems to have all this like this Verona level ability to just interpret what the Lord must be thinking. So yeah, Deb's
Mm.
the kiss ass storm chaser. Yeah.
Right.
Um. But yeah, like Deb keeps sort of getting it wrong, whereas yeah, Gilky's just freakishly good at being on her level in a way that I'm like, this feels more than just he's good at working under her for a couple of years. Like he's either been here a very long time or there's something going up.
Mm.
Yeah,
I
I have
wonder.
to admit as well, just so I like Deb and Anne, I do
Yeah, I
kind of keep
struggle to
getting
keep them
a little
separate
muddled.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, interesting. I anticipate if we do get into a contest for the lordship vibe, then we will see what the understand the relationship between Gilkey and the Lord more.
yeah.
Um, I'm excited for the new others that Avery is going to add to her party. I'm I loved when we met Freak and Squeak. That was wonderful, and I'm anticipating loving the new others that Avery recruits to be her three new best friends as well.
Oh, it's just so like just hearing the list of Lost of my favorite category
Yeah, yeah,
because there's like you can sort of see, with most of the other types of like even something like an incarnation or an animus like John, you have to sort of start with, oh well, what is something that's in this category? Whereas Lost are almost the opposite. It's like, okay, I'm just going to string a couple of ideas together and then make some part of it not make any sense.
yeah.
Oh, like my favorite is the one that there's a car that play with four people in it that plays a song, and the song
Yes,
is the
the
other.
song is the
Like,
other. Yeah.
what does
What
that
is that?
mean?
What? Yeah,
um,
delightful. Absolutely delightful.
yeah, like just yeah, the way Lost are built is just so fun, and you do run into a thing with like every world in fiction, where as you start to learn the systems, you lose some of that magic because you
Mm,
see the pattern. Like when we meet a new animus now, there's just enough of a foundation of understanding animuses or animi to be like, oh, that's drawing on this and this, and you kind of
yeah.
understand them very quickly. And Lost are just inherently immune to that because their whole point is there's not really a pattern that makes sense. It's just crazy nonsense that kind of fits together in a way. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It's delightful. Um, but yeah, so yeah, Verona and Avery leave for real this time, go back home. And back at home, we skip to dinner with Verona's mum being here as well. Verona's mum is determined to understand everybody, and Sheridan is unknowable. So tension builds until Sheridan reveals that she's going to get into podcasting, which she should. It's a fun hobby, I can say. Pretty good
Yeah, I mean, you know what they say: those who can do, and those who can't podcast.
podcast about, yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. But yeah, like Verona's mum is very interesting. She's trying to be very supportive and reaffirms that like everyone has something that makes them very special, which is like good vibes. But you do really feel the sadness when like Kelsey, for example, is kind of has this moment of it being revealed to her that she actually doesn't have any passions that she has space for in her life.
Yeah, she's been so defined by her job and like her home that those kind of have to be it because she doesn't have the bandwidth to have had her own hobbies for a
Yeah,
while. Um, yeah, and like Verona's mom really like Sylvia is desperately like trying to connect with them, but like that's just something she can't relate to.
hmm
The evidence is in this room, and so she just kind of comes up empty.
yeah. I like that way of framing
Um,
it. She's just not used to focusing on parenting, huh?
Well, yeah, like because she describes herself as a people person, Sylvia, and I would I would say that she is more of a passion person.
Mm,
She likes connecting to people's passions, uh, but there's only a certain amount she can do that because she needs to at least be able to switch herself into caring about that passion for a little bit. No, it's
mm,
just caring about being a mother and being a family person just is not on Sylvia's list of things that she can really get into for an extended period of time anymore. At least,
yeah,
she might have been a better mother earlier on, but yeah, like that's part of why she can't really connect to Kelsey in this way.
yeah, yeah. Definitely, it's a fun dynamic at this dinner table.
Yeah. Like my favorite part about this dynamic though is like you can see Kelsey in particular, but also Sylvia a little bit, just starting to have a meltdown over like the way Sheridan and Verona are playing off each other. and I was like, "Oh, I can't fucking wait for Liberty to come over." Like, if this is as bad as it gets with Verona here, Liberty is going to have a fucking field day.
Mm,
And it's going to be Avery who's going to be the one just being like, "Can you please be good?" And I think Liberty will be trying to, but there's probably always so much she can. It's going to be great.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Um, so Verona excuses herself to the bathroom, but takes a while. Avery checks up on her and finds her having a really hard time with her hand, and Avery comforts her. Um,
This is a point where I realized the fun of this whole lunch party up until now was just letting us let our guards down as the end of the chapter came to hit us in the face.
yeah.
Because this hit me so hard.
Yeah, it hits hard, doesn't it? Because, like, to me, it's the thing about Verona previously was she would bottle stuff up, but we would see that bottle it boil over, and it would lead to at least a moment of like reconciliation or dealing with the problems. But it sounds like now, when it boils over, she's dealing with it privately, which means that she's, you know, like almost distancing herself more in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always kind of been her
Mm,
how she's dealt with it. It's just like, yeah, now it's I guess now what it is that she has the space to actually bottle it up, so we're not seeing it until it's getting really bad.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. The thing that really started to get me in the middle of this was like, so Verona sort of explains this winter fairy, this part of being a winter fairy, which is the stuff, the glamour actually gets more permanence to it, and it,
Mm,
it's one of those things where, in retrospect, I was like, oh, of course, that's what winter is, and I want to touch on that in a sec. But yeah, just this whole aspect to Verona here of like, she was talking about her hand being a permanent thing last week, and or maybe the week before, and we were a bit like,
yeah.
huh? Like, what are you talking about? Um, where's this come from? And this is it. Like, this maybe happened to her after Guillemay had sort of fallen to winter. Like, it's maybe a winter fairy thing. So maybe it's something she's going to have to live with, and that's just heartbreaking. Like, and ties
Yeah.
into exactly what Lucy's afraid of with Wallace,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Wallace's operation.
Yeah, gosh.
Um, so to escape the bad vibes, this winter thing, I can't believe that I didn't sort of see that aspect of Winter Fairy's glamour coming, like the idea that
Mm,
their glamour comes with this added sense of enforcing permanent changes, because
yeah.
Falling to Winter is all about your story getting locked in and becoming permanent. And when we've seen Winter Fairy stuff get used in the past, like when Silas was trying to do stuff to them before, he was using his abilities to like make the relationship he had with the Kenneteers malleable and permanent. So like
Mm,
that's what Winter Fairy stuff has always been. I can't believe I didn't sort of clock onto that as their shtick of, oh, Winter Fairy have glamour that is much more permanent and inflexible than other fairy stuff, and for a fairy that is worse.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Um,
Yeah, it's a fun one. Yeah, you're right. We maybe could have figured it out if we had thought about it more, but it's nice to
yeah,
get it and get a bit more vibes of more of the danger around Guillemot as well, right?
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I'm sort of like, oh, I can see why Guillermo is so terrified of interacting with them, because he's still just getting used to the fact that anything he does now is going to come with this sense of permanence, and like that's incredibly scary to a fae. It's scary to me. Um, like I mean, this is like the weird thing about it is I can kind of see why you'd want to be a winter fairy specialist now, like Estrella, because that feels like the most potent form of glamour. But also, it's scary because it's the most potent form of glamour.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very double-edged sword, very much so.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't wait to see more from Gillet, because I think the other thing here is the Kenneteers are still using glamour
Hmm.
fairly regularly, but with Marisica gone and Guillemay winterified, like where is this supply kind of coming from?
Yeah,
They've
are
got
they going to run out? Are they going to need to top up from Guillemot with winter
yeah,
glamour?
like they've got the rose
Yeah.
that I think Avery has. So Avery should sort of have a supply of what I am assuming has remained some summer glamour.
Mm,
But, like, in general, the whole point of that rose is that you have to use it in moderation. So, I they're the 3 of them splitting this moderate supply of summer glamour that, Guilherme left them.
mm,
Or yeah, they're gonna have to either start using winter glamour or find another source, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love the way that this chapter ends, which is Verona talking about how the Kennetiers are intimidating, and Avery being like, "Yeah, we are intimidating," as she wipes over Verona's tears, which is, I mean, they can be very intimidating at times, but this line did make me laugh.
Yeah, it's a great sort of little moment of just showing how much Avery's caring for her and like
Yeah.
highlighting because this was an Avery chapter, but it was almost more about Verona than it was about Avery, I think.
Mm.
And this final line really reinforces this distinction between how Verona is and how Verona wants to be seen. Like
Yeah.
Verona getting a tear wiped from her cheek as she's talking about how intimidating she is. It's just kind of Verona in a nutshell. Um, like, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't cross Verona. She'd absolutely like beat the shit out of me and everyone I know. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, just such a great little moment to highlight how disconnected from some parts of herself Verona really is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great way to end the chapter for sure.
I'm assuming 15.5
Yeah.
tomorrow is going to be more Thunder Bay stuff, probably from
Probably
Verona's
from
end.
Verona's perspective,
Um,
yeah.
I can't wait to see more of this Thunder Bay stuff. I enjoyed this chapter, and I feel like we're setting up this thing where we're going to be in Thunder Bay for a little bit, and then probably the shit's going to hit the fan in Kennet just as Verona's getting ready to leave, and we'll have to rush
Yeah.
back to deal with the family man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. We've got a lot of fun things going on at the moment, so we'll have to see how they continue next time, because
Yeah,
that's the end of these chapters. No extra material this week, but we do have predictions, pale predictions left by the community in our pale predictor form. You can find the link to that in the show notes down below if you want to leave a prediction.
yeah.
Elliot, do you want to start with yours?
Yep. So I brought one from Lapsed Classicist, and looking at it, you've brought one from the other Pale Predictor guest that we had. So at least we're consistent.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, Lapsed basically says they think Avery and Verona will end up using Thea's pocket universe to try and glean information on how to better deal with the Undercity, basically.
Mm.
Um, I thought this was interesting because I actually don't know if I agree that Thea and her pocket universes could be the answer, but it made me realize Ray talked a lot back in the day about how his domain can like simulate all the realms and like the world and
Mm.
stuff.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, if you frame it as, "Hey Ray, can you run simulations on how we can weaken the Undercity that Charles is doing?"
Yeah, totally. Ray's on board
Uh,
with that, right?
yeah, I think Ray will be able to find the resources to make something that's anti what Charles is doing happen.
Yeah.
Um, so just to build off what Labs said, I do love the idea of um, we keep running into these other worlds that can sort of be models for the real one, and the idea of trying to run a big simulation like that would be a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, plus we don't really know what Ray's up to, so prime time for Ray to, make a re-entrance into the story.
And Zed, I'm very
And
curious to
Zed, of
check in
course,
on
and to find out
Zed
what
and
the hell
Bree.
happened with Bree. Yeah, like is Bree okay?
I didn't we I think we got a one line in arc
Yes.
14 that was kind of like, yeah, she's fine. Charles is kind of being merciful and not, which is like, that was it because
Yeah.
it was one of those moments where we're like, oh, like Charles is a cunt, but he's not an unfair one.
Yeah, we know that she's not like dead, but I want to know how she's actually doing.
Yeah, yeah, we got told. I think all we really got told is that Charles was being nicer than he needed to be, but
Yes.
that still leaves a lot of room for her existence being pretty shitty.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm excited if that ends up eventuating. I think that's a fun pull. Um,
Yeah.
I pulled out from I'm easily impressed. Uh, Basically, the gist of it is that uh, Edith and the Family Man will team up, and the Family Man could help or force a reunification between Edith and Matthew, as well as solving the problem of them not being able to have children. In air quotes, problem. And I want to pull this one out because I just love how much I hate the idea of it. Like it's so horrifying and terrifying. The fact that the family man could use their family powers to turn Edith and Matthew back into a family is just
Yeah.
horrifying to me.
I mean, does the family man have family powers though?
Well,
I can't like
they have
he's got that
pregnancy
name,
powers. They have
but like, yeah, I wouldn't call what he has a family in the
no,
traditional sense. Same
no,
as like how the vice principal is a student. I don't know. Yeah, I
but
guess we'll see.
I'm not anticipating that it will be a happy family, you know.
Oh no, for sure. Like
But like a forced commune vibe, which is what the family man does.
you're right. Matthew being with Edith is about as family as what the family man sex
Exactly
cult
right.
is. So yeah,
Exactly right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Uh, withdrawn.
yeah, I just found this horrifying, so I thought it'd be a fun one
Yeah,
to
I like
put
it.
in there, put out into the universe. Maybe by saying it, we'll prevent it from coming to pass. But yeah, thanks everyone for leaving your predictions. As I said, you can find the link to leave predictions in the show notes on the episode down below. You can also leave your question and answer questions for our 100th episode next week
hmm
in the discussion thread, which we linked down in the show notes below.
Or at least, you don't have to submit them to us. You can just get them ready to stick your hand up next week.
Yes, go to doofmedia.com/discord to join the Discord, so you can join in if you want. And while you're on the Doof Media website, you can find all the other cool shows on the network.
Yeah, like one we haven't plugged in a long time, and we really should be is Do the Right Thing.
Yes.
Um, where every week everybody writes like a little short story in half an hour, and then you read other people's and you talk about them. You get critiques from Alexandra and Jarvis, and it's like, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I don't have the time to participate to the level I'd like to anymore, but when I used to, it was a great time.
Yeah, I will still drop into the subreddit and read the stories every so often. There
Mhm.
are always some great stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah, the people who write as that, like, what people are able to put together in half an hour is quite impressive.
Yeah, 100%. It's a very fun vibe. Um, if you want to support the Duff Media Network, you can become a patron at patreon.com/duffmedia and get access to all kinds of cool perks, bonus shows, other things too.
Yeah, and don't forget about Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/wildbow. He
Yeah.
writes the story, you read the story, give him money.
Yep. I think he has 400 to 600 active patrons who are defending him. So it'll be hard to take him down, but we're going to try.
Wait, what?
That's how many people the Family Man has, Elliot.
No, yeah, no, but why are we taking him down?
I don't know.
That's
Don't worry about
I,
it.
I got the family man part. I'm just curious why we're fighting him all of a sudden.
Well, we usually make some kind of joke about Wildbow's patron at the end of each episode, and none of them usually are real. Like, I don't know why you're holding me to such a high standard for this one.
Because they at least usually still tie into encouraging you to go to the Patreon,
Yeah,
not
true.
take him
Not
down.
actively taking him down, yeah.
Like we've got to somehow twist it so that joining the family man's ranks is good now.
Yeah. Which maybe it is.
Yeah,
We don't know.
I mean,
We
they
haven't met the
seem
guy.
happy. None of
Yeah.
them wanted to go join Lucy. They must be
Exactly. Nobody
happy.
wanted to leave, all right?
Yeah, that means they must want to be there.
Exactly right. Well, we say none of them want to leave, but we did meet this chapter people that wanted to leave, so
and
that's
they
not
and they
quite
did.
true. Yeah.
Well, they did though. So
Yeah.
nothing sus going on in that cult.
Yeah, and to tie that back to no, never mind.
This has gone way off the rails. Let's just cut it off
Anyway,
now.
bye.